This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so it's 6 PM and we're calling to order the Monterey Select Board. Right now, Susan Cooper and I, Justin Maycook, are at Town Hall in person, and I think we're expecting Scott any minute to log in.
Is that him?
That might be him right there.
Melissa said he was trying to log on. I can't read it.
Yeah, that should be
Is that you?
Scott.
It's his caller, so he must have called on the phone. Scott, is that you, dude? Maybe not.
Wait a minute, let's see. I assume it's him, because we haven't had a lot of callers.
No, apparently not.
So the first item on the agenda is the police chief contract. Oh wait, here, I see. Oh, that's Donna.
Thanks, Don.
Scott, are you caller one by any chance?
I might be.
Oh,
Okay.
you are, yay, you're here.
Okay, so Scott's joining us remotely. The first item on the agenda is the police chief contract. Brian doesn't have anything back to us, so we're gonna take that up next week.
Okay.
Sounds great.
The second is the review of forms and process for town administrator annual performance evaluation. So we have two forms to look at. The first is the one that the select board would fill out. And Great Barrington did not have a Word version of this. I guess they got it as a PDF version from ICMA or some organization. And I just copy and pasted it into a Word document, because I can't edit PDFs with my
Me neither.
level of technology.
Thank you for doing that, what a pain.
It wasn't too hard, but I just changed town manager to town administrator. And then the couple other changes we discussed last week, like getting rid of town charter and getting rid of where it said does not do administrative tasks or something, because I didn't think that related to Monterey. Other than that, it's just a 10-point evaluation where you rate 5 points, 1 to 5, so it's 50 different criteria. And then at the end, there's 4 narrative questions for like a longer response. I think we kind of generally agreed to that last week of using this form slightly modified. The biggest question remaining is how we will compile and handle all of the responses once they are submitted. The way, I just left it in here the way it was written by Great Barrington, or the way that Great Barrington had it, which was that it's submitted back to the select board. But we had discussed submitting it to the HR director. The only question, I guess, remaining being what do you do with it? What were we gonna do with it after we submit it to the HR director and she compiles them? Does it come back to the select board in any form? As well as how the 360 feedback form relates. One thing that I was thinking just to throw out there is if for some reason we need to continue that discussion of what exactly we're doing with the responses once we have them to next week, like if we need to ask council or something, we can just remove that part of the process from this.
And go ahead and do it.
And go ahead and start filling it out, so that way we could have 2 weeks to fill it out, and then next week we can decide exactly what the post filling it out looks like. Because basically what you run into is the open meeting law, one way or another. And so I had introduced the idea of what if everyone just submits it and that's kind of it. There's no follow-up. But obviously the drawback to that is there's no follow-up. To the extent that we want to be able to follow up on the performance evaluation and take it up as a select board if it makes sense to do so. It's unclear to me exactly what that would look like.
So I was gonna throw some ideas out on the same topic. And like, I think that if we were to take the part out, that says how we do it in here, so we can fill out those. If we fill out ours, we do finalize the 360 evaluation form for direct reports and boards and commissions with high contact or dependence on the TAs. So we can send those out so they can get theirs in. That would put all of that information would flow to the HR director. She would then organize and summarize all that information and draft her proposed evaluation letter. If she sent that to each of us, we could then, here comes the tricky part. At that point, we have to sort of make a call. I think that if we want to keep it out of public meeting, we have to entrust it to the HR director. And we have to say, okay, you draft the letter, we're each gonna make our comments, and we're going to trust you to incorporate them in the whatever way you see fit, and if you have to come to us again because there's a strong disagreement among board members, I guess we'll have to cross that bridge. But if we hope that the process is smooth enough that there isn't strong disagreement, right? It's just a question of how that gets worded in the letter, then she drafts that letter, she finalizes the letter, she meets with the TA. And that's the process for this year. And it would keep it out of public meeting. I mean, I think we might wanna work like next year, maybe we would work towards having that discussion in public, but I think as a first round, it would really be smart to keep it as a private process to the extent practicable. That's what I would put out there. Thoughts? Scott, thoughts?
Yes, dear. That sounds about the right avenue, I think, for this year. We kind of entrusted our HR person to oversee everything in that aspect, and if there were problems, that they would then come to us with them. So I think that we should let our policy do what it was written to do, and that entrusts the HR person to take care of that that review. And then if there becomes negativity in the review that she feels she needs to come to the board for, then that's her prerogative, as well as an expectation that we would have of the HR. So I'm good with letting the HR person kind of run with this unless there becomes, something that she feels is a red flag that needs to be run up the pole.
So I think, and the way that I understand it, it would be each board member submits the evaluation and that's kind of the end of it for the board and the board members, unless the HR director kicks it back in our direction.
I would have said there was a second cycle, that we would submit that, we would get her proposed letter, and we would have an opportunity to independently make comments on it, but entrust her to incorporate those. And only bring it to us if there was some sort of strong disagreement or problem. So it would give us the opportunity to see that letter before it was finalized, even if we weren't discussing it in meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would run that by Donna.
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
That's fair.
But I think we're all on the same page that more or less the initial round is submitting all the forms to the HR director. And then how about I follow up with Donna and say, at that point, could the HR director make a summary evaluation, combining all of the data that she receives, all the input from the board members and from the 360 review. And then could individual board members see that
And comment.
Well, I think
and comment?
you certainly need to make certain that it's maintaining open meeting law. So that's number one priority, right?
Yeah, so I will, how about this? We'll just, on the first page, under select board member's name, it will read each member of the select board should complete this evaluation form, sign it in the space below, and return it to the HR director. And then we'll delete evaluations will be summarized and included on a future select board meeting. And then if we go to the second page, right above performance category scoring, in the paragraph beginning leave, all evaluation pages will be summarized into a performance evaluation to be presented by the HR director, right?
Yep.
Instead of the select board. And then I will follow up with Donna about what we can do, what legally we can do at that point.
Yeah.
I definitely think you need to consult her, but it seems to me like, as long as we don't have a conversation with each other, as long as it's a communication between the HR director and us, it's her summary we're commenting on. And we're not discussing it. I think it should be okay.
Yeah.
That's the process I was just making sure it was a process that I was describing clearly.
Yeah.
It should be okay, but asking her seems wise.
That's it.
Alright, if that's it for the main evaluation, then I will make those small changes and that we agreed upon on the first page and the second page. And then I will disseminate it to both of you, and I think 2 weeks is reasonable.
I don't think there's a reason we should have to take more than a week to do it, but if you want 2 weeks, we can do that. I mean, it's only like, not that many questions.
Yeah.
There's a little, like, it's hard to make a choice, but it's not that many questions.
Yeah.
Do we wanna talk about the other thing too, so she can finalize
Well,
that and get that out?
and I think that's maybe where 2 weeks is probably makes sense, as much as we wanna keep things moving along in a timely manner, is in the 360. I feel like 2 weeks is a reasonable amount of time, because some of these people are volunteers.
Right, that's fair.
So for the 360 review, the only thing there's a couple things that I changed, but the first thing is, it was sometimes referenced this person and sometimes
Yeah.
referenced this employee.
Yep.
And I just thought we should make it consistent, so I
Yep.
just changed it to this employee,
I like it.
because it's really a review of the employees in their capacity as an employee. And then that was all the changes I made to the, like, multiple choice section. In the open-ended questions, I looked back to the initial draft that Sophia had sent us last week, and I just liked some of the way that she had worded things,
I don't
so
have a problem with your changes, they're
I
okay.
just said, what are this employee's demonstrated strengths? What are this employee's areas for improvement? And then what are your suggestions for this point, how to improve based on your feedback? Which were really the questions the three
Right.
questions that she had last time. I also deleted what 3 or 4 words would use to describe this employee, just because I feel like, it's not,
That's fine.
I don't think it would yield that creative responses, but.
No, I get your point, all of them. So did you, Scott, I don't know if you looked at it, but I sent out about an hour before a meeting, an Excel sheet that has a list of all the boards and commissions and how much interaction and reliance they have on the TA. And Sophia had asked me to kind of look at that because she felt like the whole list of boards and commissions was a lot and that some of them might not really have sound feedback. So I put that together for her, but I wanted you guys to have a chance to give me feedback on it too, since it's what she's relying on. I rated the level of, I had conversations with most of the board chairs I rated their level of reliance, I put it as cooperation, but really it's like, how much interaction, how much reliance do you have on the TA? And I rated it low, medium, or high. So there were 4 came in at medium, which are the Board of Health, the Conservation Commission, the Parks Commission, and the Renewable Energy Working Group, and 4 that came in at high, the Council on Aging, the Finance Committee, the Cultural Council, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. And there's notes in column G that says what the things are that they rely on her for, or, you know, why that rating is what it is. But I'm happy to get feedback. This was just my effort to try to solve the problem.
Yeah.
So is the idea that all of these boards and commissions will be consulted or be, have a 360
The
form?
chair would be given
Yeah.
that, and I was recommending that it was only the mediums and highs.
I
Just
think
to keep it, because if you count it up, right, there's 15 of these, plus how many direct reports? That's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I find it hard to distinguish, say, this group should have a 360 form and this group not.
Well,
I mean, if it was gonna be like elected or appointed where it's cut and dry. But it's hard, like, the finance committee is elected, so in theory, I mean, they work on the budget with the select board and the town administrator, but in theory, they're elected. Whereas almost the clear distinction would be appointed, work directly under the town administrator, kind of in that direct report line. But, I mean, I don't think, especially because you added the data questions on the first 8 questions, I would think the more feedback, the better.
Maybe you wouldn't think that if you were the one collating all the data though.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed, but I saw Sophia's point on, like, if you don't have much interaction, what's the point, really? So the reason I think it's important that the finance committee would be included, they're not a direct report. However, their work for the town is extremely important. They're part of our bylaw, but they're also part of MGL, and their job relies on interaction with the TA, right? They get all the numbers from her, they have extensive cooperation with her during, or not, during this period, I think mostly they do. And I think that's, it's a very different type of interaction and a much more robust one than probably most of the other boards and commissions have with her, in terms of number of contact hours, for sure. Am I wrong?
No, I mean, I think if we're gonna do a 360 review,
You want
and we're not gonna do it cut and dry, like it's only for appointed
Mhm.
boards and departments, then I think it should kind of be open. I mean, some of these, I think you're right, but, and part of it is just literally the current people in that role or not, right? Like Parks Commission, Parks Commission relies on the town administrator and works with the town administrator. In theory, I mean, they're an elected board like the finance committee, but they rely and work with the town administrator, on things, so. I don't know, I would just offer the 360 feedback form to everybody.
Scott, you have a thought on this one?
How about you mean to every single person or to the head of each commission or board?
I meant to the chair of each commission or board. But rather than.
That's fine. I don't mind that at all, with the caveat that they don't have to respond at all if they don't want to. There could be a no submission or a submission, because like you say, you look down Susan's list, there's only 4 or 5 that actually are supervised under this position. But everybody in town interacts with the town administrator. When you walk in the door, there's the town administrator. So at some point we have to say, we gotta stop asking people how they feel about somebody and just say, okay, this is the group that we have to concern ourselves with. In a way, you know what I mean? Otherwise, you open up for scrutiny. Where does the scrutiny end?
So it comes out there's 16 boards and commissions on this list, plus 9 direct reports on the organizational chart, I believe. Did I count that right? Police chief, director of operations, treasurer, accountant, town clerk, building inspector, fire chief, officers and CC admin staff. And I don't know, I mean, treasurer and accountant are hired companies, but I still think that we would have to tell her who the right person there was. But I still think it's appropriate, because they have to work with her, and they rely on her for certain types of information, and they provide information, and she asks them questions, so. I don't know what the rules are in that, but probably Sophia does.
Okay, how about we use that and go with that? That we entrust a lot with our HR director. How about we let the HR director pick and choose and let us know what they chose from this list as to which, maybe not all groups every year get selected to review. So maybe this year we have 4 of these 16, and that's who we asked for. And next year we'll choose 4 different ones. It's also a matter of getting this thing accomplished.
I mean, why don't we this is what I would propose as far as getting it accomplished. I don't like the idea of picking and choosing, really. I think if we're gonna do a 360 review, and we're gonna offer it to boards and commissions, let's just offer it to them and give 2 weeks from today. Or even that Tuesday, because the HR director is in on Wednesday, and say February 7th.
Yeah,
And-
have it in or it isn't gonna be counted.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, so there's no other changes as far as the substance of the form?
Well, I
I'm
have
fine
to
with
tell you that I don't have that form. I have never received that, and I cannot find any email wherever I look that would have your form. But I do have Susan's form right now in front of me. So I can't. I'm just saying that I can't tell you what the form looks like. So as we discussed last week, it seemed like you were going to make a few changes that were not very substantive, but I can only approve that you did what you said you were going to do. So if it looks good to you two, roll with it. The TA form.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we have it printed out here, but I guess you don't have an email copy. Where's that?
That's fine. I don't think that it's that critical. The form.
Okay.
No, it is what it is.
Okay.
It's in your, Scott, just so you know, it's in your packet, it's sitting here on the counter, on the desk, so.
Yeah.
Like, you can get it whenever.
I know it's all there. I appreciate Melissa's diligence and type pension fund.
So I would move to approve the performance evaluation form to be completed by the select board and the 360 feedback form to be completed by direct reports and board and committee chairs with a due date on both of February 7th.
A second.
Is there any other discussion? All right, we'll call a vote.
Yes.
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 Okay, and yeah, so that is how we will proceed. I'm going to ask Donna, I'm going to explain the situation and say that all the select board members are going to fill out this form and submit it to the HR director, at which point can the HR director send to each member of the select board a compilation, a summarized evaluation, and can board members respond to the HR director, or if not that, what can be done at that point?
I get the sneaky feeling that we'll be denied that route, but we'll see. We'll ask them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that she'll be summarizing our opinions means that we can't then each other look at it, but we'll have that discussion, and she's very timely, so we'll know by next week, so that will be before
Yeah.
it's even due. Okay. Draft response letter to Southern Berkshire Ambulance's request for funding.
Don't have it.
Are you on your email right now, Scott?
Yes, sir.
Alright, I'll get it to you right now.
He's sending it right this sec.
Thank you very much.
Better living through tech. Limping along.
Did you get it, Scott?
Negative.
Reload your email.
Oh, I just did.
Okay.
Okay. I think that I'm either having some tech difficulties with this laptop. And perhaps what I'll do is I'll come in and give it to Melissa to look through and see if there's something that's blocking some of these things. I can't imagine what it would be, but no, I've got nothing in the last 20 minutes from anybody.
Can you share your screen?
You didn't just get it now?
I'm sorry, say that again.
You didn't just get it right now?
No, not here in front of me. No, it's not there. Last thing I got was from Wendy Germain.
Alright, can I read
Yeah.
it to you?
Also, do
Oh,
you have
sure.
the ability
Like, tuck me in later too.
I'm not logged in there.
Okay.
It'd be a process.
Process, okay.
Dear Southern Berkshire Ambulance Service, we are in receipt of your January 10th request for funding in the amount of $51,669.36 from the town of Monterey in order to support your organization and cover its fiscal year 24 operating expenses. Thank you for
Just
reaching
got
out
it.
to us. Okay,
Just landed in my lap here.
alright, then we'll individually read it, and I will say that Sean Tryon, fire chief, approached me before the town meeting, and we talked briefly about this, and he wants to be involved in these discussions because he works directly with Southern Berkshire Ambulance. So I think that it would make sense for us to run this letter by him, if not also the finance committee, before we hit send. But if we have changes to make before running it by Sean and the finance committee, then we should do that.
I'm all up. Let's do it. Let's run it by both those people. Like you say, if Sean's the interaction, I've got my personal opinion on it, but that's just it. And I'm not going to stop anybody from even thinking about running it through and getting the finances blessing as well as Sean's. What's good for the town is good for the town, regardless of anybody else's feelings.
So I only have one change in the paragraph before the table. The assessment we suggest is based solely on last year's call volume and proposes that each town pay $196.19 per 2022 calendar year call. Just to distinguish it from fiscal year, to achieve Southern Berkshire Ambulance Services total fiscal year 24 request for $350,000.
So that dollar value multiplied by the total amount of calls between all these towns would equal their budget? Is that what you said?
Yes. So where I'm getting
Cool.
at is there were 1,784 calls.
I get you.
They want
I-
$350,000.
Yeah.
Now,
I
why
follow
they
the
want
math.
$350,000 is a different question, but I didn't tackle it in this letter. No, I mean, like, I'm not saying it's wrong, maybe it's too little, maybe it's too much.
Right.
Where did you come up with it?
Right.
Yeah.
No,
But maybe the finance committee, I mean, at this point, I just want them to maybe recognize that this is a more fair way of evaluating. Okay,
I think it should be vetted through the finance committee and Sean, definitely. And then the
Okay.
select board has the ultimate last decision making prowess.
so what we'll do is finance committee is meeting short staffed, but they're meeting next Tuesday. Sean, I will send it to Sean and the finance committee tonight or tomorrow and ask them for input for for a meeting next Wednesday.
Yeah. Sounds
Okay.
right.
So item 4 of old business is the fiscal year 24 budget. Nothing, I know we're gonna do most of this through joint meetings, but there were a couple things that's come in since our last meeting that I think are worth touching on. Cause Melissa got us some information on some of the questions we had.
So just make sure to say which sheet you're on. Are you,
Yeah.
are you in the workbook? Cause I'm in the workbook, but you just tell me where you are, so. I
Well,
can
I'll
track.
start off just in order of what I have. So the town clerk's office. What I was wondering is if we could, I don't really know what the timeline is, but would it be possible to try and advertise and hire in the next couple months? That way, we know that we have someone hired at that budget, at those hours. Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
Marie and I
Yeah,
are
and
working
Melissa-
on an ad and the job description right now, so hopefully we'll have something for you for next week.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just hoping that if, obviously, we've had in the past couple of years, times where we didn't get a lot of job applications, but that we know that, okay, we have someone hired at that rate, and if it needs to be a higher rate, we know that in advance of the budget. But that was my only concern, that's why I had that highlighted.
Okay. Do
The-
we, by the
Good
way,
catch.
since it's coming up, did we ever finalize, does Gary know that the current disposition of what's happening in the clerk's office? Have we ever finalized a letter to Gary regarding that, or is he
So-
still in limbo?
Gary met with Marie one day when Melissa and I were doing a training on the electronic voting. And I think they had Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that they had a discussion about when Marie could use Gary, including like at the special town meeting where he was working.
Yeah, I think she let him know that there wasn't really any work, but she'd call him for some per diem things, like we've asked him if he wants to do the rabies clinic. He'll do the special town meetings and elections. And apparently she also asked him if he was interested in becoming the town clerk, and he told her no.
Okay.
Okay, so you, are we gonna write a letter to Gary?
Well, I think the way that we left it, last time we discussed it, which I think is the way it still is that it's a matter for the town clerk and the town administrator, unless obviously, if we need to hire somebody or fire somebody, then we'll do that. But right now, I think we left it off that Gary was gonna have a discussion with Marie, which he did.
I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that there was closure for him, that was
Yeah.
my only thing, alright.
And Melissa will bring before us the job description and the ad, which she always does before we put it out to hire, or put it out advertising. So we can have those kinds of discussions then. The shared human resources director expenses, Melissa, you're saying that instead of raising and appropriating $14,000, we can encumber special articles?
Yeah, we wouldn't encumber it. We would transfer it at town meeting. We would request to take those 2 articles and transfer it into a new line item.
Because they were
Where are you
already
jumping
raised.
around to now?
Sorry, Scott, the human resources director. The request is for $14,000, which is Monterey's portion.
Yeah,
And the idea was that since we had at town meeting approved and raised and appropriated some monies for, what were they for exactly?
They were for shared HR services. We just never ended up using them. So we should have a balance of about 14,000.
So we approved them, raised and appropriated them, but never used them, so this would be transferring them from where they're sitting now in the special article to this line. So it would not mean actually having to raise and appropriate again.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a little bit of a, we're moving money around, but at the end of the day, the other option would be let that money go over into free cash and then raise and appropriate, but this saves one cycle. So-
And we're using it for the same purpose, so yay.
If there's no other questions on that, I'll move on to the next.
Yeah.
So the tandem axle loan and the library loan, Melissa, would it be possible for the Unibank or the treasurer to come in and speak with us, just because I know that there's a minimum payment, I believe, on each of these two items, but first of all, what is the minimum payment, and then second, what are the options for paying more than a minimum, and what's the benefit of that? So whether that's a recommendation we can get from Unibank and the treasurer, if they wanna come in, I thought it was very helpful to have David Eisenthal to discuss the balance sheet this fall, so I don't know if he's willing to come in again. I would have questions for him.
Yeah. I can schedule that.
The veterans benefits, we discussed potentially moving it down to 2,500, but Melissa contacted veterans benefits and we're thinking more of level funding at 5,000 because we never know when there are going to be claims.
Okay.
I'm on board with that.
I think that's smart.
Town council, right now it's two accounts, town council retainer and litigation fees and expenses. Last year we appropriated 21,500. Obviously, we've kind of had a crazy year with litigation and we've gone now twice to special town meeting, asked for more money. Hopefully, we're not predicting that same, but I do think that we should keep it at 21,500 because it keeps some flexibility as things arise. And then the one question I have, Melissa, is do you think the accountant would have any problems with combining those two accounts and calling it legal fees and expenses?
I don't think so, but I'll double check with her.
Yeah, because it's transparency, but now that we don't really have a fixed retainer, it's kind of hard to distinguish between, what is litigation and what is within the normal services, and sometimes they spill into each other. And I feel like it's clear enough to say legal fees and expenses, like basically we're gonna be paying town council out of this account.
And I don't have a problem with allowing that, it gives us more flexibility. To the best of information and belief as of this moment, Hume is the only, town council relevant suit ongoing or that could reasonably be predictive as of this moment, would that be true? She's nodding, yeah.
Okay. But yeah.
I don't wanna to raise money for a suit that might happen,
Yeah.
at the same time, I don't wanna leave us.
I think it's nice to have some money in there because
Yeah.
out of everything, it's good to be able to go to town council and we've been running overages. I think it's unfair to drop it.
Yeah.
Since we've been going back to special town meeting. I know it's been extenuating circumstance, but I feel like to drop it, God forbid we have to go back next year's special town meeting, that would kind of be a joke. Why did the select board drop it and now they're coming back?
So you're suggesting we do it at 21.5? So
Yes.
Okay, I'm with that, I like it.
And I think at this point, we should run these by the finance committee.
Yeah, for sure. But we have to have these conversations or we can't do that.
Yeah. The other question, unless people have other specific topics they wanna bring up, is what departments we want to meet with. Melissa, do you have a list currently of all the departments that we're hoping to have at joint meetings, or do you still want input from us?
So you're the only one that's given me input.
Okay, but we talked Parks Commission, Highway, Fire, Police, right?
I think
Well,
library needs to come in.
Library.
I know one of the finance committee members wants the community center to come in.
And what are they gonna do when they come in?
They'll answer further questions about their budgets.
Or is there something alarming in these budgets that raises alarms or hackles on the back of our neck? Or is this just,
So I can
Parks
speak
has
to the
a
ones.
pretty hefty wish list.
Yeah, I can speak to that, Scott. So when Parks Commission, they came in, they knew that they were presenting, a lot of items that were kind of wish list items, which frankly, the finance committee had asked for. They asked for, what do you need to keep doing what you're doing? They've asked for three levels. So I think it'd be good to meet with the Parks Commission and discuss what really their priorities are and what we can afford reasonably.
I agree with the Parks Commission.
So Highway, has a request for the fuel management system and for, I forget if it's a 3/4 ton or a 1 ton pickup. I think,
And the tractor.
and the tractor.
No? Well, we just gotta do, if it fits in our budget without busting our levy, we gotta do it this year, cause the next 2 years look like there's lots more stuff coming up.
Yeah,
If we've got room now, this is the year, because we're lower than it has been, and let's get some of this stuff figured out. If you look at that fire department line item, looking for, I think, $15,000 this year or something, because they said it was going to be $525,000 for a new thing in 4 years. That's only going to leave us $130,000 towards a $525,000 piece of equipment. I think we need to upgrade certain reserves. We need to kind of find out where our budget is, and let's push it up a bit to get these things covered. You've got a little of that wiggle room without raising the rate, and you got to strike while you can, because the next few years could be harder, knowing that there's these big capital things that are looming ahead.
I think that fire department stabilization is actually a little bit outdated because we got rid of it, actually. We combined it all into one general stabilization fund.
Yeah.
No?
Oh,
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. I was thinking of the capital. I'm sorry.
So we should just make that small amendment to reflect that. Oh, the only other thing I noticed while we're on that is somehow the money that we raised to first fight Hume, the 11,437.31, as well as the Walker deductible, ended up in meeting warrants, printing, and postage. It just needs to go one line up.
Susan pointed that out. I fixed it earlier.
Gotcha.
He did better than me, he figured out where it came from.
Well, it's a very.
I just noticed the number seemed weird.
Just a very unique number.
Yeah.
So, and then fire, it was the capital requests, and police, there's a couple capital requests.
Right.
And I think it's just better if the whole boards can meet with them and have those discussions, so that we
Well,
can
if
make
there's
informed.
time. But haven't we kind of already gotten all that information from them in their request form? I mean, we've already asked them to tell us why they want it. Now we're meeting with them to tell us why they want it again. Don't we know?
I mean, I think that's one of the clumsy, there's no perfect way per se to do the budget, but I think that's one of the clumsy ways where, one person from each board kind of learned about it, but others may have questions. And then, I just think if we end up having to deny some capital requests, which is more than likely, at least one capital request will be denied. At least if we meet with the department heads, we can learn what the priorities are, so that if we have to deny something, they're always gonna say it's important, but, okay, but if push comes to shove, what's really important?
Right.
The
I was just
new,
under the impression that capital request would have been in sequence. Like, but anyhow, it just seems that it's getting messier to do this than simpler. If you keep going back and asking for the same information again and again, I almost feel like we have all the information if we just realize it and look at the numbers, go through the budget like Mark would read them out. If there's a hole that somebody has a concern on, we call it out, highlight it, run through the entire budget. Then those are the things that we talk amongst ourselves in the finance committee with, and narrow it down to the point where there may only be 8 questions. We don't need to ask everybody everything. If there's only 7 or 8 or 9 items on the budget that make us wonder. I'm just trying to hurry up the idea here,
Yeah.
because before you know it, it's going to be upon you.
There's only
Which
6
of
groups to meet with. I think we'll be okay. We're starting next week with them, and I think I'll be able to get 2 in each meeting. I think we'll be okay, Scott. Because we did let them know during the preliminary meetings that there might be a need for additional meetings to clarify some of their requests.
Yep, I hear you.
so next Wednesday at noon, we're meeting with the finance committee. Do we have 2 departments already lined up for that? Or
No,
are
but
we
now
not?
that I have a list, I will do that. I'll come up with a schedule tomorrow.
Okay,
I have a quick question, Melissa. The
Yep.
electronic voting, is that for the ballot counter?
Yeah.
For the, okay.
For
Just
the
checking, 'cause
actual
I-
elections.
It's already get the clickers, but it's not for the clickers.
which one are you looking at?
Uh, Electronic voting.
So that's
from
from
last
last year.
No, FY.
I put it on the
So it-
same line because they're
yeah.
both electronic. I can call
Right,
it something
it's
else if you want me to.
It's 2 different systems, but yeah.
Right, well, one's the clickers and the other one's the ballot counter.
Yeah.
But that's why I was asking, cause I was
Yeah.
like, wait, I thought we did that, but that's fine.
Okay,
I actually had
Yeah.
a few other items that I just wanted to raise, so I was letting you go through your list first.
Yep.
So I do, and we can wait, if you wanna have this conversation when we're in the joint committee, I'm okay with that. But I did wanna have a conversation at least about the reserve fund.
yes. What line is that? Sorry.
So
Master.
Scott, for you, I'm on the FY 24 proposed budget in the master budget workbook from the 25th.
What's the line item?
The line item, well, the account number would be 132, it's line 21 in the Excel sheet, town reserve fund. We
Yeah.
currently have it at 30 grand, and I'm just, a number was thrown around at the joint committee meeting last week of 50, and I personally think it would be better to have a little more in there. I would be in favor of 50, but I'm open to discussion. I just wanted to see what you guys were thinking.
I think 50 is a nice starting spot. Should never go lower than that, in my opinion.
I think it's good, it's good, especially if we budget tighter throughout the budget to have a little bit more of a cushion. I do think the finance committee probably, has ultimately the say, but we can let them know that we're,
Well, that's it, I just wanted us to have the conversation, so when we have the conversation with them, we know kind of where we stand, we've already taken the temperature of the room, as it were. Alright.
Don't forget the warrant belongs to the select board ultimately.
So I just, it's not something I think we have a ton of control over, I think it might be later on here, but I was kind of shocked at the increase for the Mayflower for the revow. It's 2.5 times 5 years ago, I mean, I know everything's going up, but I was like, wow, from, what was it, 6 grand to 14.5?
I haven't gotten to that letter yet, from Scott's side.
Yeah, it was a lot, so I, because I just saw assessor's expenses, which is what made.
Is that reflected in here?
That's not reflected in here yet, is
I
it,
have not.
Melissa?
No, because I
Okay.
think we still have some questions to ask. I mean, if it, according to Scott's letter, it's due to the fact that the principal assessor can't do some of the duties, so I think that position might need to be reduced a little bit.
So Scott said in
What
a
was that,
follow-up email,
Melissa? What was that?
In
Scott
Scott
said in a
Steibel's
follow-up
letter,
email that the Board of Assessors would take on some of the field work.
Which they have
right,
already been doing for years.
but if the duties have been reduced from the principal assessor, that would only make sense to reduce the salary as well, if you're not doing the same job that you once were.
Why are we thinking that?
I think that's kind of a sensitive subject. Maybe we should deal with
Yeah, because he's
HR.
also, I mean, he may not be able to go out and do physical work outside, but according to Mr. Steibel, he would be doing more of office and clerical work for them than he had in the past also. I think trying to go after somebody's salary is a pretty demeaning.
I'm not trying to go after someone's salary, just the way that he presented it was that less duties were going to be performed.
Well, after you keep reading that same letter chain, it goes into quite the detail that his work would not be reduced. It would actually possibly increase. I'm a little surprised at that, Melissa, that you would even suggest such a thing. Anyhow, next subject.
Okay, do you have
Yeah, I do.
something, Susan?
Melissa and I talked about this earlier, line 53 on the Excel sheet, account 175, planning board clerk.
Yeah.
Since we're rolling, it looks like we'd be making that part of the office assistant duties.
Mhm.
So we would need to, what would we do, go to 1 in case we have to change it?
So we talked with Tom Sawyer, and the one reason that it doesn't bother me to keep the money in is the time clock system. Because in theory, before, it would have been very difficult to say, what, were you doing planning board work, or were you doing finance committee work, or were you doing X, Y, or Z? But if we split up the hours, and I'm not saying we should necessarily have it as a separate account, but I think we should talk to the planning board. It gives some flexibility. It's the same way when we hired the select board secretary, we had it as two separate lines, select board secretary, office assistant, knowing eventually some of the duties may be combined or may be fulfilled by one person. I think with the time clock software, if we were able to flesh out what the planning board needs for hours versus the finance committee and the parks commission, it wouldn't hurt, because the person could clock out of office assistant and clock into planning board clerk. If that's what the planning board really was dead set on doing.
And for one thing, it might not even be, it might be when they're working for the planning board, they're just working for the planning board that day.
Yeah.
So it might not even involve a lot of switching. I don't know, I mean, having a lot of different accounts seems sometimes more difficult than it's worth. But if we're talking about a temporary thing while we're working out what the position is, temporary meaning like the whole year, I'm not opposed. Do you have a thought on this, Melissa?
I think Justin makes a good point.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
let's leave it
I
in.
mean, I'm not opposed, we gotta kind of figure out hours for office assistant. I also, yeah, because, and we haven't really, we had one for a few months, but maybe not long enough to really figure out what the regular hours were. Okay, but we can, I mean, I'm open to that too, but I think we should at least let the planning board know if we're gonna do that.
I'm fine with that, I just wanted to make sure we're not double counting and ending up with a couple grand extra that we didn't need to have in there because the person doesn't have that many hours, that's all. Sorry, I'm just trying to
No,
scroll down to the next one. Got that answered. We're gonna leave off the conversation about the Parks Commission, monitor until we meet with them.
Yeah, so but I mean, that's really a big one, I mean, there's a lot of parks commission requests. Yeah, and I know that Frank is doing some work to figure out what is in their operating general budget.
Okay.
Like try and get a really good sense, and Melissa had done some that, we did that back when we were talking about ball field too. But it became a little bit confusing because they had a lot of one-time projects that they were doing this year. And they also are gonna have two contracts, one with a lawn mowing company and one with probably Southern Berkshire Community Center that does lifeguarding.
Right,
So if we can have those contracts in advance, we can budget more tightly.
wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, I think that's, oh, the only other question I had is why is the cultural council not a regular line item if we're funding them every year?
I understand the cultural council, I don't really understand exactly what's going on, other than that it's a little bit tricky because they're donating money usually to nonprofits or individuals. And
Okay, then you get into.
we have the
right,
anti-aid
right.
amendment, and I don't really fully understand, other than that, I think Melissa, please chime in, but I think we were advised that it should be a special article and not a operating expense. I don't know the full background.
Yeah, Veronica from the state cultural account said that we, in order to match their funds, we have to do it in the form of a special article, like a revolving account.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's the end of mine, until meetings.
Alright, so we will meet next week, the beginning of our meeting next week is with the finance committee. And what's the agenda of that? We're gonna just start meeting with two departments that meeting, or are we gonna do something else?
That's the plan. You have a couple other things that day as well. Just give me a second.
It's a noon meeting, right, next week?
Yes.
Yeah.
The noon meeting, yeah, right now at noon, you have meet with the finance committee. Jim is coming in at 1 o'clock to discuss, Lovers Lane, Gould Road, Fox Hill Road project, and the water distribution system off Sylvan Road. And then you normally meet with Sophia, so I have her coming in at 1:30.
Okay, so maybe Jim, if he doesn't mind, could do a 12:30 with the finance and select board?
Yep, that's what I'm gonna try to do.
So it's Jim's 12:30, when was Sophia?
I think 1:30.
Okay.
1:30. I was gonna give you an hour with the finance committee.
Sounds good, okay.
Okay, new business, 5A, bid for the Chevy Suburban, and the winning bid was 15,300.
Yep.
Which is
This
crazy.
is selling an old one, right?
Yeah, crazy high. What was it, a 2,000?
Wow.
Yeah, and we thought we were only gonna get like 6,000 for it.
Oh my god!
So we just have to accept this?
Yep.
Okay, motion to accept the bid of 15,300 for the Chevy Suburban.
Second.
Is there any other questions about that? Alright, we'll vote. Justin, yes.
Susan, yes.
Yes.
Okay, Suburban sold for 15,300. Next item is the Beartown Mountain Rd engineering proposal. From Foresight.
Oh, it's the Foresight one, okay.
So I know Scott had expressed some concerns to me about the items that were listed as the possible extra items and no dollars amount there. I did reconfirm with Jim that he's met with Foresight several times, and those are all items that would be unusual, but we could run into them, and that's why they're listed that way. If anything, he thinks the ones that we could run into would be the Army Corps of Engineers, and any permitting with Concom is the most likely. But as far as like the excavator and stuff like that, all that work will be done by the town, so there wouldn't be any cost for that stuff. And we don't anticipate any of the other items as well. It's kind of just a pro forma.
So you got the correct impression. So the question is, he thought when pressed that there would only be possibly the Army Corps and Concom out of that entire list?
Yeah, those are the ones we think that could be the most likely.
Okay, all right, that's fair. Because it's a formidable list that could become very costly.
And they know that the road runs right next to a river, right?
Kim has
So
been in
there's no
contact
doubt,
with him too, so
because if that's not included in the, the estimated services, I don't know how much that would run, but. The only other question, this is being paid for by the Mass Works grant, right?
no, the engineering's actually being paid for out of Jim's budget. Everything else will come out of the Mass Works grant.
Gotcha.
So that, just looking at this list, the whole project goes along a river. There's a bunch of things in there that, the stormwater construction general permit for disturbances over 1 acre, I wonder how they calculated if it's a warning line. How many miles of road are we talking about?
2.
2.5, 2.5.
Is that gonna hit the 1 acre mark? It might. I don't know how they calculate if it's a road versus a, like, normal acreage project.
This is from where you hit dirt to the gate at the state forest, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be my only concern, I mean, if they have the wetland delineation and culvert excavation, it's very obvious to us, there's probably gonna be different Concom things, but.
Do you want to wait till next week and you can talk to about it with Jim then?
I'd say if it can wait, let's let it wait. We can have that 30-second discussion with it.
Okay.
Just a thought.
It's only a little unsettling because if some of those did get triggered, it would be good to have a bit of what would be involved in them, right? If we're talking an extra $100, it's not a big deal. If we're talking an extra 10 grand, it's a huge deal.
Okay, so we'll table
Yeah,
it
exactly.
next week, when we have Jim in here.
Okay.
The next one is Municipal Vulnerability Plan Grant Contract Amendment.
So they just miscalculated the amount for item 6, I think, right? That was my impression.
Yeah, so my only question is, this is being paid for out of MVP phase 2, or is this paid for, or how are we paying for this? It's not gonna come out of town taxes, right?
Correct, yes, she shook her head, no, not out of town.
And what was the initial compensation?
I just looked it up.
You know what else?
It's like a $4,000 difference I looked at.
We signed an addendum where we were going to make a mutually agreed upon invoice procedure, but we never did we?
I'm just trying to find the original contract so I could see what it said.
And there was a addendum that we got everyone to sign. Cause they say this is the first amendment, I don't know if that's an amendment or what it is. A payment schedule stipulation. This document has been signed by the Select Board of Monterey with the stipulation that BRPC will provide in a timely manner a payment schedule that details the invoicing method for the project. The payment schedule will be agreed to and signed by all parties and attached to this agreement as addendum number 1. We never got it. I trust BRPC, we do a lot of work with them, but
The original amount of compensation was 42,600. So the difference is what, like 42?
yeah, it's 4,000. They asked if we had any questions. I mean, my only question would be, have they come up with an invoicing method, like a percentage? They said to be agreed upon, but that was back in May. And it's January of the following year. And I think we got them to sign it. I think we all signed it. So my question before we sign this is, do we have that yet? And if we don't have it, but I'd like to know if it exists.
Okay.
Alright,
So we'll come back to that next week. I'm pretty sure somewhere that payment schedule stipulation should be signed by the executive director and the select board. I think it actually was delayed. It was when Steve was leaving and John were leaving and Susan was coming on. So I don't know who all would have signed it, but it would have been right around then. Review draft financial reserve policy. We have a couple minutes to discuss this. We can't approve it tonight. We'd like to do it with the finance committee. But Susan, you had some questions.
right now you're gonna find it. 'Cause do we have a written version?
Number
of that?
6.
Number 6, huh? There it is. Okay. Okay, so,
Do you want me to discuss, you brought up some things, I can
Right.
start just by discussing them.
sure, go.
So 13 to 27% seems like a huge range.
Yeah.
It's made up of 2 different ranges. The stabilization fund here sets a target range between 12% and 20%. A minimum balance of 12% and a maximum balance of 20%. And the idea is that you're building it up when it's below 20, if you want to, especially when it's below 12. And once you hit 20, you don't add more money to it.
And that's so that would put this total stabilization at a max of 20% of our total annual budget?
Of the current operating budget.
Operating budget.
So let's call,
So would that, what
for-
would that number be right
let's pretend
now?
it's 5 million. 12% would be, what's 12 times 5, 60? So 600,000.
And
20% would be a million.
Right,
So the goal would be 600,000 to $1 million for stabilization fund. Which, Scott, what did you try to keep it at, the stabilization fund during your first tour?
It seems like the goal had always been I think what we achieved was somewhere in the 7. It may have hit 1.1 at one time. But I think it ended up running somewhere in the high 7s. But the desire had always been right around 1.1 million
Oh, yeah.
what's the
to shoot
current
for.
stabilization?
7, maybe just 7-ish. I don't have that right in front of me.
We have it as of 12/30/22, the general stabilization is 607, 607,000.
So kinda low,
Yeah.
was mine,
That's low.
so I just wanted to make sure that I was looking at the right thing.
We haven't been spending it either. Well, I don't think we spent it for a single thing last year, but we haven't been building it. We didn't put any money in.
It must've gotten spent
Yeah,
for something, for one, and now
that's
it's
strange.
6.
Oh, over the years, I just
Yeah.
mean last year.
Right,
So that is the 12 to 20%.
where do you see the number, by the way, of what it currently is? Oh. Okay.
So then for free
You-
cash, yep, what's that, Scott?
Are you back into that master budget sheet?
Yeah, it's at the very, that number came from the very bottom of the printed out sheets from, the FY 24 budget off the master
Yeah.
workbook. Okay, which it actually looks like it's 610 to me, because the retiree is a separate thing.
Yes,
Yeah, so it's actually even lower than 7.
607,
Yeah, it's low.
607,000.
Yeah, okay.
Depends who you ask. I mean, some people think it's below. Our auditor recommends 3%, right? Am I correct in that, Melissa?
3% for stabilization.
It's 3% of that and 3% of free cash, I believe, for a total of 6%.
But that's just the auditor. So then, free cash is a little bit tricky, and you identified some things that are tricky. Because we get free cash certified hopefully in the fall. Lately, it's been pretty early. Some towns don't do it till the spring or the winter. But we've been doing it in the fall. And whatever you start with, so I set a target of 5 to 7%. So if you're working off a $5 million budget, that's 250,000 to 350,000 that you get certified.
Where did you say 5%? Oh, right there, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And you said, why would we want, or you didn't say this, but doesn't it imply poor budgeting if we have excess?
Because it says to produce excess income and budget turnbacks.
So the idea being, you budget for what you need, but then once you're using the budget, you try and be as frugal as possible to actually produce free cash.
Right, but to me, that sounds like you're intentionally
Over budgeting.
either over budgeting and intentionally to produce free cash, or doing something like trying to produce it, to me, is an active thing as opposed to managing your money in a fiscally responsible way.
Yeah.
Sounds a little less like, yes, I'm doing this just to, let's not do all these things that we were planning to do so we can produce more excess free cash, which I didn't like the wording.
We could just do carefully manage their appropriations and then
Yeah.
to delete to produce excess
That works.
and budget turnbacks.
Yep.
But then here's what happens. We have a special town meeting, usually about once a year, after we have free cash, usually in November, December, sometime. And we spend some free cash, usually. And then annual town meeting comes around and we spend more free cash. So there's this question of how much do you want to leave after annual town meeting in free cash? Because that money doesn't open back up to us. It closes off at the end of the fiscal year on July 1st. And then it doesn't open back up to us until it gets certified, which could be October or November.
Sure, but if you run it down to 0, then what you get is, you don't get it back then.
Yes, but you don't, you don't.
One way you don't have access to it for a few months, the other way you don't have access to it ever.
So the rate I set at it is 1% to 2%. If we leave, so that would be like if we go to town meeting and we purposefully leave 50,000 to 100,000, working off a $5 million budget in free cash, after we spend it on any special articles, and if we use it to reduce the tax rate. Now, using it to reduce the tax rate, according to this policy, is not a good thing to do.
Right, I think this is proposing we put it in stabilization. Correct? That was what I understood it to be doing.
Yes, I mean, ideally, we're producing a few $100,000 worth of free cash and then using it on special articles. If we're producing less, we don't wanna cut it so close that all of a sudden we're under budgeting and we're under budgeting. So you wanna produce some free cash, and also it can be an account for emergencies. But then the problem is if we start producing all the kinds of free cash and then use it against the operating budget, what if the next year we don't produce that free cash? The tax rate shoots up.
Exactly, and I'm also concerned that, hopefully this was an unusual year, but looking at how much we ended up having to draw against that to cover shortfalls in the budget this year, right? If you're drawing on free cash, it's 50% vote. If you're drawing on stabilization, it's 2/3 vote. And I would prefer not to have to draw, like stabilization, to me, that's like serious backup that we're saving up for things like $1 million for the next fire engine, or there's one coming up for $600,000 this year, right? Like, these are big items. And I I don't like to see us draw down. To me, that free cash, yes, there's this period where we don't have access to it, but it's the money that allows us to be sure that we're not gonna be in an awkward situation. I don't think we should be running too close to the wire. Personally,
Yeah.
I don't like to do with personal finances either, right? I don't wanna be within a few dollars of what I'm bringing in. 1% of 5 million is 50 grand, right? How much did we draw on free cash this? What's the total?
This year so far, I think about 100,000, give or take, right?
So, but last year during the budget process, we left about 40 or 50,000, Melissa, I think.
Right.
We had at one point said we wanna leave $100,000, but it's tough to say, we're gonna take this money that we have. And in some ways, you're right, it's good to keep some free cash available. But on the other hand, if you're really saving up for a fire truck, I think stabilization is the better way to do it, because it's in there and you know it's saved. If you leave it in free cash, there's the whole certification process and I don't think it's the way to save up for large expenditures. But
I guess, given that we drew 100 grand of it this year, I'd be more inclined to do 3% and.
2 to
do the rest of-
3% maybe?
Yeah,
2 to 3%.
and I realize that it's a number that's squishy, because I don't know, maybe, it is a percentage, so maybe not, I'm shutting up. I'm gonna say 2 to 3%, at the minimum, and like I said, I don't feel completely solid in my understanding of how these things are used in their complexity. I have a fundamental understanding, so I'm not trying to be picky, it makes me nervous to operate too close to line.
Yeah, lately that has not been, lately we've been producing so much excess free cash.
Well, part of that was because of the error made by.
It was, but the error was discounted, the error no longer had any effect this year, and we produced 500,000.
I put my hand up.
Yeah, Scott, I
We
didn't
can't
him.
see it because you're a caller, sorry.
Okay, that's fine. The proper technique is to put money in stabilization funds and feed your reserves, feed your stabilization, pay very tight attention to the budget so you don't have $400,000 at the end of the year in free cash. You do want to have some, of course, which means, you're not going to cut the budget to its bare bones, because you just can't. So the goal is to, at the end of the year, have still $150,000 in free cash when everything's said and done. And it isn't the worst to use some of that towards reducing the budget. Some people argue that it is good, some people argue that it isn't. I wouldn't use it as the budget savior until everything else that we need to use it for is used up and our 150 stays safe. And then if there's 75 or so left over, you can throw that back to the budget. It's already taxed and money that's been taxed and taken from the citizens. So it's only fair that if after everything has been worked through the budget, there's something left, let's get it back to the people. But stabilization is the only real way to budget the future. You can't plan on having free cash be your piggy bank, and it never should be. That's like emergency stuff that you shouldn't be banking the budget on free cash. Bank it on stabilization funds. That's my
Yeah,
take.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Scott.
Me too.
And if we can set aside our 100, 150, or 2 to 3% of free cash, and then I agree, we can't have it be the make or break for the budget, and it can't be the way that we save, but if there is some to throw at the operating budget, it's not the worst thing.
No, but it shouldn't be the first thing we say is, well, we can take 250 from free cash to lower the tax levy. It's like, well, let's just try to find a way to get the tax levy lowered through accurate budgeting and vetting out the needs. There's other ways we can pay for big capital things, but if we're only talking that we have 600 grand in the coffers right now, I would say that we're 50% down. It's like Lake Mead. You got to think of it as like a water reservoir. Where do you want to see your water reservoir? If you live below it, you want it nice and full. And anybody that argues it is basically just arguing against themselves, because it's just like our home. You take a little bit of money out of each paycheck and you put it over there. And that's our stabilization funds, call it what you want, a rainy day fund, whatever, but there it is. And everybody has to do it in order to make the town prosper and work for the rest of us. Now, if our budget right now looks like it's accurate and within all the realms of normal, then I think that this is the time that we have to throw some of that extra cash that we need into that to get the amount we need to raise a little higher. I hate to say, I don't want to see the tax rate go up a dime or a penny. That's not my point, but I think if there's room right now from last year's cap and this year's potential cap to tuck a little bit of money into that stabilization fund and other reserves, we got to strike when we can and hit it, because there's some stuff coming down the road from what I've seen that's going to take some borrowing, and we still have a few loans out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, everything that you said, Scott, sounds sensible, so that when it comes to discussion, to me, so when it comes to discussion with the finance committee, I think, we'll just need to make our point.
And I'm on the same page.
Yeah, well, I can't imagine, it shouldn't be much of an elbow twist, because all you have to do is just look at it sensibly with a, it doesn't need a magnifying glass, because all you have to do is relate it to your own personal savings in your own home. Everybody, it simplifies it right down to the bone when you think about it as, well, you've got your own bank accounts at home. That's all this is, and we just need to fund it.
Yeah. All right, well, maybe we won't approve this tonight, but I'll delete the part that Susan pointed out about to reduce excess income and budget turnbacks, because it gives the wrong idea. And maybe up what we leave in free cash to 2 to 3%, so if it was a 5 million budget, it would be 100 to 150. But we'll come back to this with the finance committee.
That works.
Um,
Thanks for talking it through with me. Appreciate it.
Mail and correspondence, I don't know of any, that, for this meeting. Minutes, we can start with January 17th.
I thought they read fine.
Okay, well, we had some changes. The first thing being, Susan put it up, I think rightfully so, into the meeting with Don Tirico. Yeah. And versus this review special town meeting warrant. And then I just wrote, the building commissioner requested 3 additional hours per week due to an overage in hours worked. Don discussed that he always put down for 14 hours per week, but it was clear once he started using the time clock.
Yeah,
There's erroneous increase program, that he has been averaging an additional 3 hours per week to complete his required duties. This will appear as a $5,409 transfer request on the STM warrant to cover the remainder, and it will also affect the fiscal year 24 budget.
Okay, cool.
Review special town meeting warrant, there was a consensus to organize the articles by monetary value with the highest sums apparent first. Concom agent. The Conservation Commission requested a raise for their agent. Noel was present to discuss the request for an increase in wages to the Concom agent. Noel is requesting I think it's Noel's requesting 5,250 for the remainder of fiscal year 23 to pay the agent at $35 an hour and 14,000, and a wage increase.
Like, we did the same thing, we did it in reverse, we just need to choose one,
Yeah.
I think. I don't think it matters.
Okay, we'll go with red here then.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just, it was tricky, but it was the
Yeah.
current requesting for next year.
Exactly, I just wanted to make sure that both those things were included and that they were clear. Does special town meeting need to be capitalized?
Where are we at?
Second paragraph on the top of the page, right before the second red. Page
Yeah.
faster in the SDM.
We do typically, yeah. I'll add that in. Capitalize.
From night, not
Yeah.
nights.
And provide an update regarding the SBVA's request and receipt.
Is the amount correct? The
Uh,
50 for the,
Oh, no, it wasn't. I can get that for you in 1 second.
from our, it was, because that wasn't operating expense, the 50,000 wasn't
No,
operating
the
expenses.
50,000 is not operating, which we
Yeah.
both identified. But the ARPA request from Southern Berkshire Ambulance was 17,979.
Okay.
And provide an update regarding the SBVA's request and receipt of
17,900 or 79,
yeah,
towards a new, but you crossed out a new ambulance.
I just got rid of that whole part, but 19,979
For a new ambulance.
towards a new
Right, yeah,
ambulance
yeah.
from Monterey's ARPA monies.
Yep.
The finance committee and the select board discussed the new operating budget request in terms of the budget and call volume in Monterey, agreeing to reassess their figures. Period. The current request is based solely on Monterey's land assessment, it does not include any other factors such as call volume. Melissa suggests requesting information from other small towns to see what they are paying towards the ambulance. Documents used at the meeting. So the Southern Berkshire Ambulance request for funding, we all agree, was the document used at the meeting. I think the FY 24 budget request deserving attention was the list that I had made.
Oh, okay. List prepared by Jessica.
I just wanted to
So get rid of
clarify that.
Concom and building, then that's fine.
Yeah,
I was just guessing,
Yeah,
but I was literally just guessing, so that makes sense.
I was thinking back to it.
Yep.
Deserving attention. So I would move to approve the January 17th minutes of the joint meeting of the finance committee and select board as amended here.
Second,
Yes.
yes.
I'll abstain just because I'm not looking at it, but that's no problem.
Yeah,
We're good.
Yeah, we get it, it's fine.
Okay. January 18th. The select board discussed amendments to the police chief contract and Justin said he would present the contract to Brian. The select board hopes to finalize the contract next week. which is true.
I like your addition.
So I think at the end of this paragraph, we'll just get rid of the red stuff. And you talked about the 360
Okay.
review.
Alright,
Um,
starting with this season also.
yeah, mine was just saying what the next week was gonna look like.
Right,
And then get rid of the red at the end, and otherwise just stick with your description of the 360 review.
okay, that works for me. What?
Squeaky chair.
Okay. That window needs to be. You hear it too, right? Every time the
I'm
window.
not good at hearing.
Okay.
I hear something, but I couldn't
It's
tell you where
wind,
it's
it's
coming
wind
from.
coming from this window right here. Franklin Regional Council?
Franklin Regional Council of Governments,
Huh, okay.
Collective Highway Bid Program. I had to go back to the
I
paperwork.
bet
to
you
get
did, that's a weird title.
C Works, D&E work.
Okay.
The town administrator reported that the Council on Aging would like to cancel their contract with the transport van,
Okay,
right?
Yep.
And Melissa has legal questions for town council. Just to move to approve permission for the town administrator to contact council for this purpose. And regarding the procurement questions. No, and
regarding
For this purpose.
procurement for the community center pavilion?
yeah, and regarding procurement for the community center pavilion. There's one out, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Probably.
Documents used at the meeting, I had some additions and changes, but,
If you think they should be on there, you put them on there. I'm not good at tracking the documents and you're much better at it, so let's do it.
motion to approve January 18th minutes as amended.
Second,
Alright, we'll call a vote,
yes.
and yes, that's 2 yeses.
Are we done?
Scott, are you abstaining or voting or?
Abstain.
Okay, Scott is abstaining. Minutes are approved. Unanticipated business,
Do we have anything?
I don't have anything.
Let me see if I have anything. Nope, everything.
Scott,
No, I have no business.
comments and questions from the public?
We don't have any public here anymore unless Lori's got to say something.
Anyone wanna make any motions?
To adjourn. I
Is
motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? I'll second it.
I'll second.
Motion to adjourn. We'll vote on motion to adjourn.
Yes.
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 So the select board meeting is adjourned at 7:34 PM.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Safe travels.
Oh, yeah, you too, dude. It's not, at least I think